The street is quiet, though not silent. A thin fog hangs over the rooftops, and from somewhere nearby, the deep hum of a bread oven sighs through the air. You walk slowly, because this is not the kind of place you rush through. The ground is uneven, cobblestones glistening faintly with morning dew, and your shoes crunch softly as you move. On either side, the houses lean in close together, as if whispering secrets. And then you smell it. Bread. Heavy, yeasty, comforting. The kind of smell that convinces you that history, for all its dust and wars, wasn't such a bad place to live. Bakers are already awake, their arms coated in flour, their faces red from the heat of ovens. They shape dough in long, steady motions, the rhythm hypnotic, almost like a lullaby for your eyes. Here's the first fact worth keeping in mind. Medieval bakers often measured time not with hourglasses or bells, but with the very bread they baked. The crusts, as they browned and split, became an informal clock. If a loaf took this long to crack, then the prayers must end. If it darkened this much, then the oven was ready for the next round. A watch you could eat, though not recommended if you were still timing the stew. You probably won't make it through this day. The combination of oven heat, steady motions, and endless bread scent has a way of lulling even the most alert traveler into sleep. Still, before we need too far, a gentle invitation. If you like these slow strolls through the dull but oddly cozy corners of history, tap like. Subscribe for more if you'd like to keep walking down quiet streets like this one. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? I always imagine half of you drifting off at midnight, while someone else is sneak listening at 3 p.m. in the office. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You pass the wide doorway of a bakery. The glow of the oven spills out like sunrise, golden and thick, dust motes swimming in the air. On a wooden table, loaves are lined up, not for eating yet, but for observing. Their crusts speak a language of their own. One crack means 10 minutes. Another shade of brown means 20. A crust split perfectly down the middle, that's when the monks down the street know to shuffle out of their pews and collect their bread rations. The odd tidbit here, in some towns, the ovens weren't private at all. They were communal, shared by the whole neighborhood. Families kneaded dough at home and carried it down to the baker, who controlled the oven for everyone, which meant you not only knew your neighbor's gossip, you also knew if their bread turned out flat again. Historians still debate whether crust timing was an everyday technique or something passed on mostly in monasteries and apprentice kitchens. But for you, standing in the flower haze of this medieval morning, the debate doesn't matter. You just watch the bakers tap loaves, nodding in sleepy approval, as though each crust were quietly ticking off the hours. The day brightens slowly. Sunlight slips between slanted roofs, painting golden stripes across the stone. The town stirs awake. Merchants shuffle out, children chase hoops, a rooster insists it's later than it really is. But here, by the ovens, time is still measured in bread. A boy lugs a basket down the street, loaves piled so high he can barely see over them. He stumbles, drops one, and before he can scoop it back, a dog darts in and runs off triumphantly with the prize. The baker sighs, but shrugs. Life happens. Somewhere, someone jokes that the dog will return in exactly 20 minutes, just when the crust has cooled enough not to burn its teeth. Here's the fact for this part of the day. Bread wasn't just food, it was also law. Medieval authorities regulated its size, its price, and even its ingredients. A loaf that was too light could get a baker fined, or worse. Bread anchored society, and society didn't take anchoring lightly. Every bite was part of the legal system. The odd tidbit. Bakers often tested oven heat with whatever was at hand, scraps of straw, bits of parchment, or, if they were feeling especially bold, their own bare arms thrust into the oven mouth. A brief moment of pain told them all they needed. A crude thermometer, yes, but surprisingly effective. You glance at one baker rubbing his singed arm with a grimace that says, "Worth it, probably." Historians still debate whether bakers truly relied on crust as their mean time clock, or whether they used instinct built from years of kneading and watching. Perhaps the crust was more of a teaching trick for apprentices who needed something concrete. Perhaps the masters trusted their noses more than their eyes. You walk past the same bakery from earlier. The men look a little slower now, leaning on their paddles like farmers resting on pitchforks. The heat is endless, the rhythm monotonous, but there's comfort in the repetition. Bread rises, crust cracks, bread cools. Time passes, measured not in numbers, but in flavors. Nearby, children laugh at a loaf shaped oddly crooked. They call it the cursed bread and run in circles with giddy energy. The baker waves his hand dismissively and says, "Cursed bread still fills a stomach." A line so practical it could be engraved on every medieval wall. You keep walking, and the street hums around you. The smell of baking clings to your clothes, warm and steady. You think, maybe there's no better way to measure a day than with bread. Clocks tick, bells toll, but bread softens the hours until they taste almost sweet. Evening folds itself gently over the town. The ovens glow again, brighter now that the sky has dimmed. The cobblestones hold on to the day's heat, radiating it back in soft waves that make the air shimmer. You walk slower because everything around you has slowed down. The major fact for this stretch of the story: monasteries often used bread as a silent signal. In places where conversation was forbidden, the crack of crust became a subtle timekeeper. When loaves split just so, monks knew it was time to change prayers or to file silently into the refectory. Imagine an entire order guided not by bells, but by the sound of bread breaking. A holy clock, crunchy and sacred. The odd tidbit: some medieval people believed that bread carried personality. The first loaf out of the oven might be shared with neighbors for luck. The last loaf, sometimes, was avoided. It was thought to be moody, perhaps unlucky. Superstition slipped into daily chores the way flour slipped into every crease of a baker's tunic. Historians still debate whether bread as timekeeper was more symbolic than practical. Perhaps the crust method was exaggerated later, a quaint story about simpler times. Or perhaps it was real, and every cracked loaf was genuinely a medieval stopwatch. The records don't tell us for sure, though the crumbs of evidence linger. You return once more to the bakery doorway. Remember those loaves from the first night, lined up like sleepy soldiers? New ones rest there now, their crusts splitting with soft sighs. The bakers lean back, arms crossed, watching as if the bread will announce the hour. Cats curl nearby, tails flicking lazily, while children dart in and out, snagging crumbs when no one's looking. A baker chuckles as he hands over a loaf to a customer. He says, "This one tells me it's exactly supper time." Deadpan. The customer laughs, though both of them know the bread is too hot to eat yet. Still, the illusion of a bread clock is too charming to resist. You wander to the edge of town. The fields stretch out, quiet and golden, the last light of day fading across their stalks. Behind you, the ovens glow faintly, their smoke drifting upward like the last exhale of a long day. The smell lingers in your hair, in your hands, in the very air you breathe. And as you stand there, you realize something. Bread isn't just food or time or law, it's rhythm. Rise and fall, warmth and cool, crack and crumble. The kind of rhythm that makes life bearable, predictable, even comforting. The stars begin to appear, faint but steady. The town settles into silence, ovens finally dimming, streets emptying. You feel your steps slow further, your body loosen. The day has been measured not in bells or numbers, but in crusts. And now as the night folds over you, you let yourself drift with it. Soft, warm, and steady, like bread cooling on the table. The night begins with a hush. A low breeze wanders lazily off the Nile, slipping between mud brick houses, tugging at reed mats and carrying with it the faint perfume of sesame oil and lentils simmering on the fire. You're standing in a narrow street, the kind where shadows pool in corners and lamps glow like tired stars. You walk slowly, your sandals crunching against dust that has been walked upon for thousands of years. This is Egypt. The Egypt of jars and scribes, where even the tiniest detail of daily life is recorded, measured, and, of course, taxed. You feel it already, the soft weight of bureaucracy pressing down like a heavy linen blanket. And tonight we are following the most unexpected treasure of them all: cooking oil. A substance so ordinary, so slippery, that it held more weight in the kingdom than gold itself. You might think, gold? Surely gold was the obsession of the pharaohs. Gold shone in temples, glistened on statues, and dripped from royal coffins. But in your kitchen, yes, you, standing in this little street, it was useless. You couldn't fry your fish in gold. You couldn't light a lamp with it. And so the state smiled politely, held out its hand, and said, "Oil will cost you more than gold." In fact, here's the major fact. The Egyptian government ran an oil monopoly. Oil was pressed in state-controlled workshops, sealed in jars, and sold back to households at inflated prices. And if you dared to make your own, illegal. The jars themselves were state-issued and sometimes reused, scraped clean and resealed with a fresh mark. Recycling, yes, but also a subtle way of saying everything you have, technically, is ours. Your neighbor mutters while pouring a drop of oil into her pan. It sizzles faintly, not enough to coat the bread she wants to fry. She looks across the street at another household where the lamp burns bright. Too bright. Suspiciously bright. Perhaps someone is cheating the system. You smile faintly because even in the quiet of antiquity, envy over the neighbor's lamp is timeless. And yes, you probably won't make it through this day. Your eyes are heavy already. Still, before we wander deeper into this slow story, I'll gently ask, if you enjoy these sleepy rambles through history, please like the video, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know the place and the hour, whether it's dawn in Manila or midnight in Ohio. Now, let's ease further in. You take a deep breath. The air smells of frying onions, hot stone, and river silt. Cats wander casually between your feet, their tails brushing your legs. They pause to lick a paw, then, curiously, dip a tail into an open oil jar as if grooming themselves with luxury lotion. It's oddly elegant, though slightly ridiculous in the grumble of donkeys. You step outside to find the sun already working hard, pressing heat into every surface. The Nile glitters wide and lazy, its water thick with reeds where fishermen wait patiently, nets slack in their hands. Children chase hoops down the same dust-worn paths you walked last night, and the whole village hums with its routines. But even now, at the start of a new day, the thought presses in. Do you have enough oil to last until evening? Here's today's lesson in boredom. Oil wasn't just for cooking. It was for lamps, for rituals, for grooming, even for medicine. Without it, nights were darker, meals duller, temples less fragrant. So when the state monopolized it, everyone felt the pinch. Imagine if toothpaste were sold only by your government in approved tubes at inflated prices, and if you squeezed too much at once, someone might accuse you of smuggling. That's the mood here. The scribes sit outside the granary, cross-legged with papyrus sheets spread across their knees. The beginning is slow, on purpose. Imagine the camera gliding across fields of gold and green, where the morning haze lingers longer than it needs to, reluctant to rise. You hear birds trading their usual gossip, a soft bell from somewhere in the distance, and the steady shuffle of bare feet against the dirt road. You're here, in an ancient Indian village, and already the pace is daring you to slow down. The homes around you are simple, made of clay walls smoothed by hand, straw roofs that sigh when the wind passes, and doorways just slightly crooked. Nothing here is symmetrical, and somehow, that's reassuring. A goat bleats loudly at the wrong time, as if auditioning for attention. Spoiler, it doesn't get the role. Inside one of the larger homes,
The physician is at work. In India, such healers were called Vaidyas. He doesn't wear a lab coat. His uniform is more sandalwood-scented cloth and streaks of turmeric on his hands. Palm leaf manuscripts are stacked carefully nearby, each line carved with neat precision. Within them lies the Charaka Samhita, one of the great texts of Ayurveda, written around the first millennium BCE. It explains diet, herbs, and most surprisingly, joy. Yes, joy. It suggests laughter as part of treatment, something that modern medicine has only recently circled back to. A patient enters complaining of stomach pain. The physician listens, nods, then quips, "It will pass," in one direction or another. The room erupts in chuckles, and the man laughs despite himself. You realize the joke is not an aside, it's the therapy. Here, medicine is not just ground roots and boiled concoctions, it's the ability to take someone's burden and make it feel lighter, if only for the span of a laugh. Scholars still debate whether laughter therapy was literally prescribed in the same way herbs were, or whether it was more a cultural truth folded into the daily rhythm of healing. But here, in this courtyard, the difference hardly matters. And if you're listening along, half dozing perhaps, allow me a small kindness. If you enjoy this gentle walk through history, consider liking and subscribing. It helps this sleepy village survive in the modern jungle of algorithms. And if you have a moment before you drift away, write in the comments where you are and what time it is there. I promise someone across the world will smile reading it. The day stretches lazily forward. Children race barefoot past you, someone stirs a pot of lentils, and a parent repeats a secret it was never supposed to overhear. Life here insists on being unhurried, and so, softly, let's move further into the journey. You leave the physician's doorway and follow him beneath a sprawling banyan tree, whose roots spill like 100 wandering feet. This is the village's open-air hospital, playground, and philosophy club all at once. Beneath its branches, women grind spices rhythmically, men share riddles, and children tangle in games of chase. Laughter hangs in the air not as an event, but as background music. The healer sets down a brass bowl of herbs and motions for you to sit. A patient recovering from fever is already there, sipping a thin broth. Instead of solemn silence, the physician calls for storytellers. They arrive with painted drums, weaving tales of talking animals and foolish kings. The patient chuckles weakly at first, then stronger, until his shoulders shake and his eyes brighten. No copay, no side effects, except perhaps a sore belly from laughing. Fact slips in here. Ancient Indian medical theory held that emotions directly influenced health. A cheerful spirit was believed to aid digestion and circulation. Sadness, on the other hand, weighed down the inner fires. In modern terms, they were talking about stress before stress had a name. Near the banyan's roots, you spot small clay monkey figurines. They're not toys, but charms, left behind as playful offerings to mischievous spirits. The idea, if the gods laugh, perhaps they'll spare you misfortune. It's an obscure little cultural tidbit, but it makes sense in a world where laughter itself is sacred. Scholars still argue whether laughter therapy was systematically prescribed or simply observed as common wisdom. Did doctors write it down because it healed, or because it was already habit? No one is sure. What is certain is this. Here, healing is communal. The physician is not a solitary authority. He's more like a conductor of a symphony, where jokes, stories, herbs, and soups all play their part. You sip spiced water, flavored with cumin and fennel. The taste is earthy, cooling, and oddly comforting, as if the village itself is reminding you to unclench your jaw. Around you, the air feels lighter. Shoulders drop. Voices soften. You wonder whether you too are being healed, not with medicine, but with belonging. And then, of course, someone tells a joke about a lazy donkey trying to be a philosopher. The group laughs. You laugh. The patient laughs. Somewhere in the back, the parrot squawks again, repeating the punchline out of context. It doesn't matter. Everything here works together. The herbs, the stories, and the sound of shared joy. The sun slides lower, warming the earth with its last golden light. You walk again, this time down a narrow street where smoke from cooking fires coils upward in lazy spirals. Evening in the village has a softness that no clock could measure. Time here is more like water, pooled, rippling, unhurried. You pass by a household where a woman hums while mixing dough. Her song is not a performance, but a habit, like breathing. She sings of rivers, of elephants, of mischievous lovers. You can't help but notice that every verse carries a playful twist, a little joke tucked in as if even bread making requires laughter to rise properly.
It's oddly comforting to imagine someone in Iceland nodding off while someone in Brazil is just making breakfast. One cheeky warning: you probably won't make it through this day. Not the one you lived, but the one we're stepping into. Sleep will catch you long before the canoe sets sail. And that's fine. History doesn't mind being unfinished. It's used to it. You wander inland a little and see two men carving the hull of a great canoe. Not the kind that tips over if you breathe too hard, but a double-hulled waka, big enough to carry families, tools, and food across thousands of miles. The ropes binding its beams are made of coconut husk, twisted so tight you wonder if modern duct tape would feel insecure next to them. Here's your historical fact for this section. Polynesian voyagers planned and executed journeys across the Pacific with stunning precision, reaching islands like Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island centuries before Europeans dared cross open seas. These weren't lucky accidents, they were scientific expeditions, just without the lab coats. A cheeky child runs past carrying a carved wooden piglet. Strange, you think, but on some islands, small wooden animals weren't toys, they were charms or ritual objects, carried to honor ancestors or protect travelers. Whether this one's sacred or just part of an early piglet Grand Prix, no one really knows. Someone nearby sings a navigation chant. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic, like waves themselves. Each line remembers a star, a swell, a direction. Imagine Google Maps, but in song form, and the only update needed is your memory. Historians still debate whether these chants were shared openly in villages or kept secret by master navigators. Either way, the sound of the song feels like the sea itself has been translated into words. You stand under the sinking sun, the unfinished canoe beside you, the air turning golden. Everything slows until you feel your own eyelids tugging down. The day stretches on, but for now, you're only asked to drift. Evening slides in almost without notice. The fire crackles near the canoe, and people gather around with food. Breadfruit roasted until its smoky scent seeps into the air. You're handed a piece. It's hot, chewy, and tastes like a distant cousin of potato who never left the tropics. Here's your tonight's historical fact. Polynesian navigators could read swells like sentences. Islands, even those beyond sight, bend waves in patterns that skilled sailors could detect by touch. In the dark, you feel it. One swell quick and sharp, another slower, broader. Together, they tell a story invisible to the eye. Children weave between the fires again, the same ones you saw earlier. The carved piglet has gained a necklace of shells, looking increasingly like it's in the middle of a fashion show. A reminder, objects could shift meaning quickly in Polynesian life, ritual, toy, or symbol, depending on who carried them. As you listen, an elder begins reciting genealogy, names flowing like water. Whole family lines stretching back generations, carried by memory alone. On some islands, these recitations weren't just family pride, they were identity itself, proof of belonging, a way to carry your past even across the ocean. If you lost everything else, you could still name yourself. Historians still debate whether entire households voyaged together or whether small scouting groups went first, sending back word. Either way, the firelight flickers across serious faces and you sense the mix of fear and excitement in planning to leave. The sky emerges overhead,
bright, endless, impossibly close. The navigator points to one star that will guide the way east. Another marks the season. You tilt your head, trying to imagine memorizing hundreds of these points of light as if they were street signs. Someone yawns beside you. The fire sinks lower. You realize this sky isn't decoration. It's the map, the calendar, the compass. You close your eyes and feel the swells rocking you. Not on a canoe yet, but already drifting. Morning comes softly with the ocean glowing silver under a pale sky. You wake where you lay in the sand, still hearing the steady roll of waves. The canoe builders are already working, their adzes tapping wood with a rhythm both slow and inevitable. You help push logs into place, not very well to be honest, but no one seems to mind. Sweat beads on your brow and you feel every muscle object. Building a vessel like this takes months, maybe even years depending on the island's resources. Imagine IKEA instructions, but stretched across generations and sung instead of printed. Here's your fact for today. Some Polynesian canoes were over 100 feet long, capable of carrying dozens of people, animals, food, and tools. These weren't little fishing boats. They were floating communities. Nearby, women weave sails from pandanus leaves, their hands moving faster than you can track. Strips of fiber are pressed, folded, tied into mats that will catch the wind like wings. An obscure tidbit drifts in. Some islands believed pandanus leaves had protective powers, woven into mats not just for utility, but as blessings, making the voyage safer. A child wanders by chewing sugarcane, offering you a piece with sticky generosity. It's sweet, refreshing, though you end up with more juice on your chin than in your mouth. The dog you met earlier sniffs at your legs again, unimpressed with your contribution to society. Overhead, the navigator chants softly to himself, rehearsing the stars. His eyes flick between the sky and sea, as if both are speaking at once. Historians still debate how knowledge was passed, whether through formal apprenticeships or more organic, family-based training. Either way, the discipline required was staggering. The canoe takes shape, ropes tighten, beams settle. You step back, squinting. It isn't ready yet, but you can imagine it, rising and cutting across waves, carrying songs, children, pigs, mats, memories. A portable island. The day lengthens, slow and heavy. You realize that history, like the canoe, is built piece by piece, rope by rope, and you, just listening, are already a passenger.
You open your eyes to a medieval morning. The sky is pale, the stones beneath your feet are slick with last night's drizzle, and the town feels unhurried, as though no one has invented the concept of being late yet. You hear a faint hum of voices, the occasional bleating goat, and the rhythmic creak of cartwheels dragging across cobblestones. Then you look down at your shoes. They are not modest, rounded, everyday things. They are elongated, almost comical points, poulaines, the signature footwear of the 14th century. These shoes don't just extend beyond your toes, they stretch far enough that you're pretty sure you could use them to poke your neighbor across the dinner table. In fact, some nobles reportedly wore pairs over 2 feet long. You can feel yours flopping, like unwilling companions with minds of their own. The people around you don't even stare. They're used to this. Fashion here is contagious, irrational, and strangely competitive. A baker walks past with a modest 6-inch pair, while a merchant struts by with nearly a foot of leather curling up like a smug smile. The message is simple. Longer shoes, higher status. You imagine medieval men standing in a tavern, comparing shoe lengths the way modern folks compare phone screens. A church bell groans in the distance, and the sound rolls through the narrow street. You pause, just long enough to feel the air tremble. The townsfolk keep moving, chickens keep squawking,
And you realize that life here doesn't revolve around clocks or deadlines. It breathes in bells and seasons. You probably won't make it through this day without tripping, but don't worry, no one else here is walking gracefully either. Before we drift further, if you're enjoying this sleepy stroll through a world where shoes are longer than cents, maybe gently tap the like button. Subscribe if you'd like more of these journeys. And if you're still awake, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, let's walk a little deeper into the story. Section 2. The market greets you with sound before sight. Voices rising, a lute twanging off key, a horse snorting impatiently. Stalls crowd the square, heavy with cloth, onions, herbs, and the unmistakable aroma of fish that looks fresher than you'd prefer. Everywhere you turn, shoes are telling silent stories. The wealthy merchant with his knee-tied poulains seems to float, while a tanner trudges by with practical, stumpy pairs that barely extend at all. This isn't just shoes, it's a social ranking system strapped to your ankles. In fact, England's King Edward IV eventually passed laws restricting shoe length by class. Commoners got 6 inches, nobles 24. Yes, even your toes were subject to royal micromanagement. A scruffy dog trots across the square, pauses, and barks at your shoes as though confused by your choice of weaponized feet. You don't blame it. These aren't shoes for running or working or, let's be honest, living. They're shoes for being seen. Here's something strange. Archaeologists have discovered shoe soles stuffed with moss, perhaps for warmth, perhaps for freshness, or maybe because medieval socks were really just scraps of cloth and moss was free. Imagine pulling out a tuft of damp greenery from your boot at the end of the day and calling it personal hygiene. A boy nearby drops a clay jug, and it shatters with a sharp crack. Everyone groans, not in anger, but in the way people sigh when the obvious thing happens again. You know the feeling. As the sun edges higher, you notice your shoes casting shadows so long they look like fingers pointing toward the next street. The thought makes you smile faintly. Somehow, walking with these absurd things has slowed your steps into something calm. Historians still debate whether poulains were statements of masculinity, or satire, or simply silly fashion. The truth is, it doesn't matter. What matters is the sound. Tap, scrape, drag. A rhythm you could fall asleep to. You followed the narrow lane away from the market. Timber-framed houses lean overhead like curious old neighbors, their upper floors jutting so close together they nearly touch. Laundry sways on ropes, dripping faintly onto the stones below. A cat stretches on a windowsill, yawns, and doesn't bother with you. Your shoes, meanwhile, are doing their best impression of anchors. Each step feels like you're negotiating a treaty with gravity. And yet, you adapt. Humans always do. Somewhere in your mind, you start to believe maybe these shoes aren't absurd at all. Maybe they're elegant. Maybe they're the medieval version of that one impractical outfit you swore you'd only wear once, but somehow wore again. You pass a churchyard where a group of men mutter about the dangers of fashion. One of them swears the devil himself invented poulains. Another insists they cause moral decay. You don't mention that centuries later, people would say the same about jazz, denim, and TikTok. Some arguments never change. Only the objects do. Here's an odd tidbit. Some illustrations show courtiers with shoe tips so long they curled upward like snail shells, stiffened with whalebone or wire. Imagine trying to dance in those. Then again, you've probably seen modern heels that are just as unkind to balance, so perhaps nothing's new under the sun. The evening light softens, golden and slow. The town exhales. Merchants pack up their wares. Chickens settle. Bells murmur the hour again. You glance down at your feet, those stretched, leather shadows of vanity, and you feel strangely attached to them now. They've carried you across cobblestones,
through noise, into quiet. And as the day closes, you realize something. Impracticality is part of being human. People have always chosen beauty or status or sheer silliness over logic. Poulains weren't just shoes. They were proof that even in a world of mud and hunger, someone still thought about style. Your eyes grow heavy with the thought. The rhythm of the street fades into the rhythm of your breath. You let yourself drift. Because tonight, history is not a lecture. It's just a walk, slow and strange, in shoes too long for sense.
The morning air of Rome hangs heavy, as if the stones themselves are already tired of carrying this empire on their backs. You walk along a basalt street, smooth in some places, cracked in others, with weeds poking through like little rebels no legion ever bothered to crush. Laundry drapes from one insula window to another, white tunics fluttering in the breeze like surrender flags, though no one here has the intention of surrendering, except perhaps to another hot day. Somewhere down the alley, bread ovens glow, mixing their smell with less poetic scents drifting up from the Tiber. And here you are, quietly entering the world of Marcus Aemilius Scaurus, a senator whose greatest legacy isn't law or conquest or even scandal, though Romans loved a scandal, but rather snails. Yes, snails. Gastropods. Creatures whose greatest talents are eating lettuce and making you late for everything. But Scaurus loved them, collected them, imported them like one might today import fine wines or limited edition sneakers. You probably won't make it through this day. Your eyelids are already heavy, but that's all right. History doesn't demand a wakefulness. It only asks you drift along with it. Before we sink too deeply into the shells and soil, a gentle modern aside. If you enjoy this kind of meandering story, do give a like and subscribe. It helps keep this channel alive, much like Romans kept their snails alive in baskets of damp moss. And if you'd be so kind, leave a comment below with your location and local time. Imagine the patchwork of viewers: midnight in Melbourne, dawn in Detroit, siesta in Seville, all nodding along to the tale of one Roman man and his shelled companions. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. Scaurus strides before you, toga draped like a heavy woolen waterfall. He's tall, imposing, the sort of man who could silence a Senate hall, but right now he's distracted by a small wicker basket his slave carries. Inside, a dozen plump snails from Sicily, shells gleaming faintly like polished marble. He pauses at a fountain, leans in, and notices a wild garden snail crossing the wet stone. His eyes widen, as though he's just discovered a new province. The slave sighs. The senator has spotted another specimen. Here's your first major fact. Romans kept snail farms, called cochlearia, where they fattened snails on wine and milk. Imagine a snail diet better than what most laborers could dream of. An obscure tidbit, Pliny the Elder notes that some families bred signature snail varieties, competing in size and taste like ancient luxury brands. Yes, Rome had premium snails. Roman historians still debate whether Scaurus' obsession was seen as noble eccentricity or the subject of whispered jokes at dinner parties. Either way, he didn't care. Snails were his empire. As you step into his villa, water trickling in the atrium fountain, you realize this won't be a story of battlefields or power struggles. It will be slower, quieter, and maybe exactly what you need. The villa opens into a peristyle garden, carefully shaped, a square of nature tamed by geometry. Columns frame patches of green, while a central pool reflects the bright sky. Rosemary and thyme perfume the air, mingling with the sharper scent of damp stone. You settle on a bench, as Scaurus approaches a terracotta pot, its soil dark and alive with movement. Inside, African snails, their shells pinkish from the sands of Numidia. Imported, pampered, admired. Scaurus kneels as if before tiny gods, watching them stretch and slide. His concentration is absolute, like a jeweler inspecting emeralds. If he lived today, he would run a very niche Instagram account, Shells of Rome, and somehow make it fashionable. Here's your next historical fact. Romans didn't just collect snails, they ate them with ritual. Special utensils called cochlearia, long, thin spoons, were designed to sweep them neatly from their shells. Rome invented the snail fork before forks even existed. The senator signals for fresh lettuce. A servant hurries over with leaves still wet with dew. The snails gather, jaws working in eerie silence, like miniature banqueters, reenacting the very meals they'll eventually become. You watch, hypnotized. The slower they move, the slower your thoughts tumble. A strange tidbit. Some Romans swore snail slime cured sore throats. Imagine being told at a pharmacy window, just rub this on your neck. You'd probably fake your cough instead. Outside the villa walls, Rome stirs. Children shouting, merchants haggling, oxen groaning under loads. But in here, only the soft lap of water in the fountain, the faint rustle of lettuce, the occasional grunt of approval from Scaurus. Scholars remain unsure. Was Scaurus respected for his peculiar passion or mocked in hushed tones at dinner parties? Either way, he didn't care. Snails were his empire. 3 soft jokes drift through. First, if patience is a virtue, snail collectors qualify for sainthood. Second, these creatures are basically the sloths of the Roman pet world. And third, Rome's motto could have been, conquer the world, but don't forget to pamper your snails. The garden hums with cicadas, and the senator's world shrinks to shells, soil, and lettuce. You feel your mind slowing to their rhythm. The afternoon sun leans west, and the villa glows with gold. Shadows lengthen along mosaic floors, patterns of dolphins and vines coming alive as if they too are swimming lazily into the evening. Scaurus rises, smoothing his toga with the air of a man who knows his reputation and doesn't mind if it includes gastropods. He leads you down a corridor where murals bloom on the walls, Hercules wrestling lions, Bacchus draped in grapes. The irony isn't lost. While myth celebrates strength and revelry, Scaurus celebrates shells. Perhaps that is the quieter victory. Your fact of the hour. Marcus Aemilius Scaurus wasn't just a snail enthusiast. He was also politically powerful, serving as a deal, responsible for games and spectacles. He once staged a gladiatorial display with 150 lions, but still preferred the patient theater of a garden snail farm. Imagine throwing the ancient equivalent of the Super Bowl, then going home to admire a mollusk. An obscure cultural note. Some Roman households kept snails not only in gardens, but also in special jars indoors, so they could be fattened with scraps at arm's length, like a very slimy bread box. Historians still debate whether this was considered extravagance or thrift, or snails the caviar of the day, or the backyard chicken. The sources disagree, and you, frankly, don't mind either way. The shells are pretty. Remember the fountain snail you saw earlier in the street? Its twin seems to have wandered here, climbing the rim of a basin in the corridor. Scaurus pauses, delighted. He gestures for a servant to fetch it gently and place it among his collection. To him, it is another jewel for the treasury. To you, it is a reminder. Rome, at its core, was built not just on legions and laws, but on the human urge to notice small wonders. 3 small ironies arrive. First, the empire that conquered Britain also conquered lettuce. Second, Scaurus's legacy is remembered less for politics than for pets. And third, Rome believed everything belonged in an inventory, even the humble snail. The air cools as evening draws near. Oil lamps are being trimmed, the faint smell of smoke curling through corridors. Scaurus smiles faintly, a rare softness in a man usually weighed by office. He does not smile at the empire's borders, nor at the coin stamped with his lineage, but at the slow, steady crawl of a creature carrying its home on its back. And you, moving at that same pace now, find yourself drifting. The city outside hums, but in here, in the world of shells and silence, time stretches until it hardly matters.